angel of the presence of the Lord, the planet Mars, along with its pillar of fire and cloud, the axis mundi, led the Israelites from Egypt to the Promised Land. The pillar hovered over the tent of the congregation. When it moved, Israel followed. How did this work physically? To answer this question, we must first understand the mechanics of the polar configuration. As we have argued before, during ancient times, including the time of Moses, the Earth was part of a constellation of planets in a unique coaxial relationship. David Talbot explains,
"We earlier named the planetary components. Saturn is the large sphere at the celestial pole, no rings at the time. Venus is the discharging star-like form on axis in the center of Saturn, and the smallest sphere, Mars, visually appearing within the sphere of Venus. We've called this a quasi-stable phase of an evolving or metamorphosing configuration."
As Talbot notes, this configuration, while generally stable, did evolve, and the planets moved in relation to each other. Mars moved up and down the axis, fluctuating between Venus and Earth.
Episodic motions of Mars occurred along the axis, provoking streams of material alternately between Mars and Venus and between Mars and Earth.
This movement is described in the Scriptures. The angel of the Lord often came down or descended, meaning that Mars approached Earth along the axis. In addition to the up and down movement of the red planet, there were librations along the axis, allowing earthbound observers to see the configuration from different vantage points.
We've noted as well that a libration occurred along the axis such that from Earth the different discharge configurations were seen alternately on axis and off axis.
A libration is a perceived oscillation or fluctuation in the movements of celestial bodies relative to one another. Lunar libration is the best known example of the phenomenon. It is manifested by the slow rocking back and forth of the moon as viewed from the Earth. The libration of the moon results from the eccentricity of its orbit around the Earth, the inclination of its axis of rotation, and Earth's rotation. Because of these librations, an observer from Earth sees different sectors of the moon's surface over time, with a direct line of sight moving across the surface of the moon. Similar conditions would exist in the ancient polar configuration. There would be oscillations in the motions of Mars and Earth along the axis, and variations in distance and rotation. These oscillations would cause librations on both planets from the perspective of an observer on either. It would also mean that the axis mundi would move across the surface of the Earth due to the librations between the two planets. The pillar of fire or cloud would move from time to time. The geometry of the axis mundi, the pillar, also periodically changed. At times the pillar was tapered at its lowermost point, forming a spike or peg. At other times the pillar was broader and formed a cylinder or column.
Closely associated with the appearance of this turning crescent was the descent of material from Mars. The first effect was a luminous spike reaching earthward. As Mars moved closer to the Earth, the downward stream of material extended well below the visible sphere of Saturn, eventually connecting with the circumpolar region of the Earth.
Even today, the aurora borealis, a Birkeland current at Earth's northern polar region and analog to the pillar at the time of Moses, forms both cylindrical and spike-like forms. This explains the Mosaic accounts where the pillar was broad enough to cover the camp of Israel and during other periods of time was narrow enough to cover only the tent of the congregation within the tabernacle.